Want to learn how to make a delicious Nigerian meat pie the easy way? I'll show you. Start by adding salt to a large bowl containing the flour, then add the baking powder and the castor sugar. Castor sugar is a fine type of granulated sugar, perfect for making meat pies. Next, you'll need some very cold salted butter. Cut it into slices so it's easier to break it apart with your hands. You're going to go ahead and add it to the flour mixture to begin to form the dough. This is the hardest part because the butter's so cold. You just have to really squeeze the butter and the flour together so that it all incorporates. At this point, I decided to stop making yanga and use both of my hands so that it went much faster. I'm not going to lie, you do this for quite some time until finally you start to realize that the texture changes and starts to look more like a crumble, almost like it could be on top of apple pie. If you make a fist, it'll hold its form. However, at the same time, it'll easily break back apart. This is how you know that it's ready. Next, add 3 beaten eggs to the mixture and begin to mix it together. I transition to a larger bowl next so that I can have more space to work. Then I add the cold water. I start with just 2 tablespoons at first just to see what I'm working with. Then I add 2 tablespoons of cold milk and start to mix the dough together. Already I can see that the dough is pretty crumbly and not going to completely come together. So I go ahead and add some additional cold water, just a little bit because I don't want to put too much water. I always make sure to add just enough water that is needed for the dough to come together. Because I don't use a scale, my measurements aren't typically precise. However, in this instance, I ended up adding some additional water because I could see it's still crumbly to touch. In the end, I added a total of 1/4 cup of cold water. I always make sure never to add more than 1/4 cup. At this point, I knead the dough somewhat, but not much, honestly. I used to have to knead the dough endlessly to the point that my hands and my knuckles would get tired and my hands would cramp, but I don't do that anymore. This is why I say I'm here to save you time. I basically stop at this point, take it, and transfer it over to the stand mixer to do the rest of the work. It's much better and faster. You'll use the dough hook attachment to knead on a low speed for 4 to 6 minutes. You typically don't want to use a setting any higher than 2. Sprinkle a small amount of flour on top and then let the stand mixer do its work. What you'll see is beautiful, soft, perfectly kneaded dough. You can go ahead and cover it with some plastic wrap and then put it in the refrigerator to rest. Now I'm ready to start the filling. I go ahead and peel 1 russet potato and prepare to dice it. Since I'm all about saving time, I actually cut them into slices like this. Then I use one of my favorite tools to help me cut it into the perfect size pieces. It saves me some time, so it's much faster. Once I'm done cutting all the potatoes into cubes, I immediately set them aside in some cold water. Doing this actually has a lot of benefits. It'll prevent the potatoes from getting that brown discoloration. It's also going to remove some of the starch. Removing the starch from the potatoes is what's going to give it a better texture. It'll make it so the potatoes are more firm instead of gummy or mushy. Also, it'll allow for the potatoes to have less of a cooking time. Next, I dice the onion and scent pepper. I try to dice them both pretty small so that they mix in well with the meat. The amount of pepper that's used doesn't make it overly spicy. Instead, it makes it so it has a very slight kick. Next, add some vegetable oil to a heated pan. But not that hot unless you want to burn your food. Okay, I try this again, let the pan cool down, remove some of the oil, and again this time, add some vegetable oil to the heated pan. This time you can see it's much better, just a light heat coming from the pan. I go ahead and add the ground beef, and like usual, no leaner than 80-20 ground beef because you need that fat to have amazing flavor. Then go ahead and brown it on the stove. After initially breaking up the meat, I usually like to leave it undisturbed before flipping it over. Then, once I've let it cook completely, I go ahead and take a potato masher and actually use that to go ahead and break it into smaller pieces. This is kind of the method that's worked best for me. Once the ground beef has continued to cook and I no longer see any pink pieces, that's when I'll go ahead and add the chopped onion and then the scent pepper. I'll usually let it sit undisturbed and cook for another 2 to 3 minutes. And then I do my final mixing and breaking into smaller pieces before I add my seasonings. I do Maggi chicken tablet, black pepper, adobo, and thyme. Next, drain all the cold water and then add the potatoes. Add 1 cup of hot water to the pot and then allow it to simmer uncovered for 7 to 10 minutes. You can stir the potatoes occasionally. Once the water has reduced to about half, add a small amount of flour to thicken the mixture. Stir quickly so that there's no clumping. Remember, the potatoes don't have to cook completely after the 7 to 10 minutes because they'll continue to cook in the oven. Allow the filling to cook for about another 2 minutes before turning it off and letting it cool. Then take your cold dough from the refrigerator and cut into however many meat pies you want to make. It's best to only work with a small piece at a time because having a cold dough is what makes you have a nice flaky crust. I take a single piece, form it into a ball, and then used a floured rolling pin to roll out the dough. This is about how thick I roll out each meat pie dough, but you can do it according to your preference. Next, I take a bowl, any bowl, and cut a circle shape with a knife. You can use whatever size bowl corresponds with what size meat pie you want to make. Once I'm done making all the meat pies with the fresh dough, I actually do go back and use all those scraps located off to the side. The thing is, you will notice a difference between the first cold dough that you use and the warm scraps that you use in the end. You'll notice that the meat pie crusts aren't as flaky. However, I still like to avoid waste, so I use them anyway, and honestly, they still taste great. So go ahead and put a full spoon of filling in the meat pies. Use some water around the edges to seal the meat pie and then press down firmly. You'll finish it off with crimping with a fork. Next, go ahead and put all your meat pies on a pan and give them a nice egg wash to give a beautiful golden color with baking. Use a fork to poke some holes to allow some venting while baking. Then put them into a preheated oven for 35 to 40 minutes. And the result is beautiful, delicious meat pies that were easy. Biting into a Nigerian meat pie takes me back to my childhood of spending summers in Nigeria. It was always to my frustration that when I came back to the US, I couldn't find that same great meat pie. Even the most experienced caterers always explained that they don't make meat pie. It always had to be a special designated meat pie baker. Throughout the years, I've tasted many meat pies. Some were good and some were not. Only once I started to make my own meat pies did I discover why people typically don't like to make meat pie. The truth is, it's very time consuming. However, I've incorporated a bunch of tips that help save me time and I hope can help save others time too. Now, making a Nigerian meat pie is one of my favorite things. Thanks again for watching. Check out more of our cooking videos here on YouTube and also head to platedplanner.com to pick up your own digital cookbook.